Welcome back. We're engaging in a course or a conversation, as it were, about difficult conversations, and specifically, we're talking about it in the context of student leadership, um, and giving examples and thinking of ways that it directly is student leaders are directly impacted by engaging in difficult conversations. So topic number 4, which is actually step 3 in our process, is doing it and actually engaging in the conversation. So we'll talk to you a bit about being clear, and you'll have an opportunity to do a practice of that and practice clarity in your phrasing. Word phrases to avoid. So things to avoid saying when engaging in the conversation, and then you versus I statements, and you'll have an opportunity to practice that as well. So 3 steps for more successful conversations. This is our model that we've been using. The notion: gaining clarity, moving past avoidance, and then actually engaging in the conversation and doing it. So step 3, doing it. It's important for you to be clear, direct, and sensitive. Um, and as you'll see, and what we'll get to, is that by doing this, you have the best chance for success, and you have the best chance of having a conversation where the other person feels engaged in the process. Direct and insensitive causes tears and hurt feelings, so that's being too harsh and not really taking into account the other person's perspective and coming right at it. Indirect and insensitive causes confusion, right? So that's being too sincere and not actually getting down to an action item in the end. Right, so you have to find the middle ground there, and that's where essentially you'll find success. So this chart here gives you a sense of where things are at by using examples that you might run into. Right, so direct and insensitive, you're blaming others and it has to stop. Right, indirect and sensitive. Is there any chance that you just didn't understand the importance of this work? Right, so it's not really getting down to any specifics. And then direct and sensitive. As a part of my job, I'm supposed to help the team be effective, including ensuring that everybody's pulling their weight. I want to help you figure out how to get your work done more effectively. Right, so again, you're getting to that place of putting an action item in at the end. Another good example in the next row, people are complaining that they can't work with you. You have to be easier to deal with, right? An example of that same sort of scenario in an indirect and sensitive way of approaching. Have you thought about how you work with other members of our team, right? So you're not being clear. You're certainly not being direct. You're just sort of putting it there, right? If you were to ask that question and then do some more follow-up, it might work. Collaboration, the last one, collaboration with others is critical for us. I received feedback that other people are finding you hard to work with. Let's figure out a way to improve this, right? So again, getting down to that solution, an action item in the end, right? A critical part of being direct is being clear in your communication. So finding a way to avoid ambiguities and avoid leaving things up to interpretation. So this chart here will give you a sense of how to clear things up, right? So a really clear or unclear statement would be, you really blanked the bed back there, right? So in no way am I giving the person a specific way that I'm unhappy with their performance. I'm just basically saying you messed up, right? So I leave it up to interpretation. They can take that as that I have taken offense to them as a person. They could think that it was a specific part of what they did. It could be that they think it's everything, right? So by clearing it up, you give them a better chance of success. So here's a more clear example. I had a hard time following your lead back there. Next time, could we try and keep the communication open, or could we try and communicate better? So you're getting to the specifics. What I really had challenge with is I couldn't figure out what direction we were going in next. And so I'd appreciate if you could help me keep the communication lines open and help that happen. So now it's your turn to take a shot at making these sentences a bit more clear. Again, using a blank sheet of paper or by opening up a window on your computer, take an opportunity to make these unclear sentences more clear. And then remember to try and be direct but sensitive in terms of how you phrase or how you frame them. So here they are in order. Your attitude sucks is the first one. Your work is incredibly unprofessional is the second. And that's the worst idea I have ever heard is the third. Okay, so take an opportunity. Like I said, remember direct but sensitive, right? Taking into account person's feelings and trying to be empathetic and trying to gain some perspective that way. And then, in essence, trying to get it down to some detail. You'll have to make up some of that detail. I get that because you don't have the context, but invent the context and maybe come up with a clearer way of saying that. So we're going to move on to the next slide. If you don't want to get there next because it's the possible answers or some. So here are some possible answers. Again, these are my thoughts. You may come up with better ones. So the unclear, your attitude sucks. The clearer way, we need a bit more positive enthusiasm to make this work, right? So actually what's bad is the negativity that you're bringing to the team. So we need a bit more positivity. Your work is incredibly professional. So the more clear way might be, I think if you had your work reviewed or looked at ahead of time, it would make it more effective, or it would be more effective, right? And then that's the worst idea I've ever heard. The more clear way might be, I'm not sure how this idea will work. Could you tell me a bit more about how you see this going or how you see this working? Again, getting the person involved in the conversation. So some words or phrases or things to avoid when having this conversation. First of all, you want to avoid ordering or directing people. So you want to avoid words like you have to or you must. They simply won't work. So avoid using those words. Warnings are another one. So you'd better not or else. Delivering ultimatums, again, it only raises the tension in the room and creates for a negative sort of frame of the conversation. Advising is challenging. So why don't you is an example of advising. So giving someone advice. Similarly to that is sort of preaching or sort of coming to a place of I know better than you because I'm the leader. So I think you ought to. Is a good example of preaching, and you want to avoid doing that. Evaluating or blaming is another one. So you're wrong. Finding, sort of evaluating the process or putting blame on the other person. Do your best. Again, direct but sensitive in terms of how you approach conversations where some person there may be an element of what they've done that has harmed someone or you, but trying not to use words like you're wrong, again, only elevates the tension. And interpreting or diagnosing, so you need to, very similar to advising, right? The last thing you want to avoid is using you statements and doing so rather than I statements. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about that, and then we'll have I'll deliver some quick general tips as to what you should do when you're delivering feedback or when you're talking to somebody about maybe their performance or something that they've done, or basically a difficult conversation that you have to have, so a decision you've made, etc. So you versus I statements. Again, a great way to remove emotion from a statement is to use an I statement rather than a you statement. So here's an example. A you statement is you're constantly asking for exceptions for things, right? So you being the emphasis. And the I statement is, I've noticed that the protocols or the mandatory trainings are sidestepped. I want to work with you to make it better. So I've noticed. So what I'm essentially doing is I'm owning the issue. Whereas by saying you've completely divested yourself from the issue, right? And then as we get to the end of the sentence or the end of the statement, we talk about coming to a solution together, right? Or helping and assisting, right? And I think that's important. So now it's your turn. Again, using a blank sheet or a new window, convert the you statements to I statements, um, and and do so in a way that's direct and sensitive, as we talked about. And as I just mentioned, try and find a way to involve the person in a solution, and invest yourself in that solution as well, to really show the importance of the solution to the problem. So we're going to switch to the next slide, and like I said, pause the video if you don't want to see the possible answers, but we're going to move to the next slide now. So here's some possible answers that I've come up with. Again, yours might be better, so you might want to stick with those. But the you statement here, you are always late. I've noticed that you've been coming in late, and I'd like to discuss why. So I'd like to learn why. You're off on your own, and nobody knows what you're doing. Rather, an I statement could be, I don't feel that I have a good sense as to where things are at with the event that you're working on. Could we schedule some more regular updates or more regular updates? You let this all down. There's no way that I can trust you. So an I statement, I'm frustrated with the way that all that unfolded back there. I need to be certain that it doesn't happen again. Could we discuss ways that we can avoid that outcome in the future? Right? And then the last one, you never follow through on things. Whereas an I statement or an I version of that, I've noticed that you're having a hard time meeting deadlines. Is there a way that we could work at helping you prioritize the work that you need to do, right? So what we're going to get to next in the next topic is some tips and tricks, some quick group activities. Some things to think about though when you're engaging in these conversations. Some good tips and tricks. First of all, remember to seek permission to have the conversation. So ask if it's a good time and space. Also, it's good to use a soft entry. So in essence, start the conversation in a way that's a little less direct before getting into the direct piece, right? Often what you will be presented with is an opportunity to talk to somebody about something that's been brought to your attention. It's always best if you, rather than getting into real specifics about who told you, but trying to sort of mitigate the concerns that would develop if you said, a lot of people have come to talk to me. So, again, that brings up a sense of tension, anxiety, and embarrassment within the person. So trying to limit that. And then obviously the best way to deliver feedback or to engage in these conversations is to be direct. Okay, so the next topic, as I mentioned, tips and tricks, the group activities, and remember that there's a quiz at the end of this one, and we'll see you for topic number 5.